October 21st, 1967. The destroyer's radar operator sounded the alarm for incoming fire. The captain quickly ordered, quote, "hard to port." INS Alet began her turn, but a bright yellow light was already rushing toward them across the Mediterranean. The projectile slammed into the starboard side and exploded below the waterline. Steel ruptured. Fire and seawater tore through the lower decks. 20 years of naval experience had betrayed them. The evasive maneuver left Alet broadside, her entire port flank exposed. Then came a second flash of light, a second explosion. The destroyer had survived Nazi wolf packs and Arctic convoys, but now a tiny wooden boat was about to make naval history with weapons of the future. Steel gray and knife-shaped, HMS Zealous rode low in the water. At 362 feet and 9 inches long, about the length of a football field, she'd been built with toughness in mind and designed for speed and efficiency. The Z-class destroyers, part of Britain's war emergency program, were made to be workhorses, reliable, mass-producible, and versatile. They were based on the pre-war J-class hulls and machinery, but stripped of anything non-essential to expedite their construction during the war's desperate years. Fresh from commissioning, she steamed out of Scapa Flow, joining the 2nd Destroyer Flotilla of the Home Fleet, her sleek 35-foot beam cutting through waves like a razor. At around 1,740 tons standard displacement, swelling to more than 2,500 fully loaded, she was heavy enough to take hits, but still nimble enough to dance through danger. By late 1944, Zealous led carrier escorts during daring mine-laying raids off Nazi-occupied Norway, shielded Arctic convoys under relentless Luftwaffe attack, and hunted U-boats near Kola Inlet. In February 1945, she plunged behind enemy lines to rescue 525 Norwegians who'd been hiding for months in snowbound caves. 2 months later, she was storming through Jøssingfjord, sinking German merchant ships. And on May 9th, she sailed into Copenhagen alongside cruisers and destroyers to witness the surrender of the German fleet. However, victory eventually led to downsizing. After World War II, the Royal Navy had more ships than it needed. Many destroyers, including HMS Zealous, were no longer essential for a peacetime fleet. At the same time, on the other side of the Mediterranean, a brand new country was scrambling to build a navy from scratch. Israel, founded in 1948, was surrounded by enemies, and with barely a fleet to speak of, it needed real ships fast. In 1955, the British government sold Zealous to Israel. This gave Israel an immediate boost to its naval power with a battle-tested warship, without having to spend years or an entire fortune building one from scratch. After the purchase, she was repainted, and HMS Zealous became INS Alet. In 1947, the United Nations proposed partitioning Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. Jewish leaders accepted the plan, but Arab states rejected it outright. On May 14, 1948, Israel declared independence. Within hours, 5 Arab armies, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Lebanon, invaded. The war that followed ended in 1949 with an Israeli victory and a series of armistice agreements. Israel emerged with more territory than the UN had originally granted. Jordan took control of the West Bank, and Egypt occupied the Gaza Strip. The war displaced over 700,000 Palestinian Arabs, many of whom became permanent refugees. No formal peace followed. Border skirmishes and Palestinian guerrilla raids from neighboring territories, especially Gaza and the West Bank, continued throughout the early 1950s. Israel responded with force, further hardening hostilities. By mid-decade, the Arab-Israeli conflict had become a volatile fault line in the post-war Middle East. And hovering over it all was the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union didn't waste time picking sides. Washington backed Israel with quiet shipments and diplomacy. Moscow was less subtle. Soviet arms flowed into Egypt, then Syria, delivering T-34 tanks, MiG fighters, radar systems, artillery, and even advisors. They were aiming for global posturing and the chance to control the crossroads of 3 continents. War returned to the Middle East in October 1956 after Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal, angering Britain and France, who feared losing control over a key trade route. However, the conflict had been building long before that. Egypt had blocked the Straits of Tiran back in May, cutting off Israeli shipping, and cross-border attacks by Fedayeen militants from Gaza were growing more frequent and violent. Before dawn on October 29, 1956, Israeli paratroopers slipped silently into the Sinai, launching Operation Kadesh. Tanks and mechanized columns growled across the desert, smashing through Egyptian defenses in a swift push toward the Suez Canal. Just offshore, Eilat entered the fray, freshly commissioned and painted Israeli gray, cutting through the Mediterranean. Her Type 293 air search radar scanned the skies, while surface scanners searched the waves for any sign of enemy vessels. Twin 4.5-inch Mark IV guns stood ready on the bow and stern, capable of hurling high-explosive shells over 12 kilometers. The Beaufort 40mm anti-aircraft guns rotated smoothly, their operators' eyes peeled for aerial threats. 2 days later, on October 31st, just off Haifa, Eilat received word of an Egyptian destroyer prowling the eastern Mediterranean. The Ibrahim El Awal, a former British Hunt-class ship flying Cairo's colors, had slipped from Alexandria and launched a daring raid, shelling Haifa's oil refineries and docks. As a result, Eilat joined sister ship Yafo and the French destroyer Kersan in a coordinated hunt. At 3:30 p.m., contact was made. Eilat's guns sent shells crashing into the sea and Egyptian decks alike. Ibrahim El Awal fought back fiercely, but outgunned and outmaneuvered, she was trapped. Jets strafed her deck, crippling vital systems. Smoke curled from her battered hull as rudder and engines failed. By late afternoon, the Egyptian destroyer surrendered. Israeli sailors boarded swiftly, raising their flag above the fading Egyptian colors. Towed into Haifa, her crew taken prisoner, Ibrahim El Awal would sail again, reborn as INS Haifa. As Israeli armor pushed deeper into Sinai, Eilat prowled the coast. She shelled Egyptian outposts near Rafah and provided cover for troop landings at Sharm el-Sheikh. Her speed and maneuverability allowed her to slip past coastal batteries before they could take aim. Then came the escalation. Britain and France hit Egyptian airfields with strikes and landed troops near Port Said. For a brief moment, it looked like victory was within reach. But a powerful global backlash, led by the US and the Soviet Union, forced a humiliating ceasefire. Under pressure from both superpowers, the whole campaign quickly fell apart. By March 1957, all foreign troops had withdrawn. In the late 1950s, the Soviet Union unveiled a new kind of naval threat. The Project 183R, better known by its NATO designation of Komar class, was a fast attack craft that appeared almost unremarkable. It was just 25 meters long, built largely from wood, and based on a World War II-era torpedo boat design. Atop the rear deck sat two large launch canisters, housing a revolutionary weapon, the P-15 Termit missile. The P-15 Termit, also known as Styx by NATO, was a radar-guided anti-ship missile with a range exceeding 40 kilometers. Each Komar carried two of these missiles, which flew at high subsonic speeds, guided by semi-active radar, and packed a shape-charged warhead designed to punch through a ship's hull. The Soviets had created the first truly practical ship-destroyer missile, and now they were passing this game-changing weapon to their allies. Exporting began in the early 1960s, and Egypt was among the first to acquire Komar-class missile boats. They were based along the Mediterranean coast, near Alexandria and Port Said, and quickly became a key part of Egypt's coastal defense. Though the Komar boats mostly stayed tucked away in port, the threat they posed was very real. By 1966, the Egyptian Navy had fully integrated them into regular drills, showcasing precise radar targeting and swift evasive maneuvers. Yet Western experts remained doubtful of their actual danger. To them, these were just small wooden boats, too flimsy, too vulnerable, and too reliant on everything going exactly right. The idea that such tiny vessels could consistently hit and disable modern warships from long distances seemed too far-fetched, if not outright impossible. On June 5, 1967, Israeli jets screamed over the Egyptian desert just before dawn. Coming out of hidden air bases, their engines howled against the clouds as they dropped low over airfields, opening fire. Israel had deployed nearly all of its 200 jets in the attack. Bombs tore through hangars and runways, sending fireballs rolling into the sky. The ground shook with each explosion, the Sinai Desert slowly being enveloped in black smoke from destroyed fuel depots. On the ground, Israeli tanks surged forward, crushing sand and stone under their treads while pushing deep into enemy lines. Chaos was unfolding in every direction. Over 300 Egyptian warplanes were destroyed, all but ensuring Israel's air supremacy in the area. Meanwhile, the Egyptian Navy never left the docks. As Israeli jets roared across the skies, the Egyptian Navy was hit before it could move. Warships moored in Alexandria and Port Said became stationary targets, blasted from above in a relentless aerial onslaught. Bombs tore through decks and fuel stores, while fires raged and smoke towered into the sky. Much of Egypt's navy was struck before it could leave port. Several ships were destroyed or disabled at anchor, and the rest were kept in harbor, effectively neutralized for the duration of the war. Simultaneously, Israeli fighter jets struck Syrian and Jordanian bases, crippling their air forces. In the West Bank, Israeli infantry and paratroopers advanced on Jerusalem. By June 10th, Israeli forces had captured the Golan Heights from Syria, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and Sinai and Gaza from Egypt. By the end of the conflict, Israel had shattered 3 Arab armies, secured territories more than 3 times its size, and fundamentally altered the landscape of the Middle East. In Cairo, the humiliation burned hotter than the desert sun after the 6-day catastrophe. The Air Force was shattered, the army routed, and the Navy humiliated, having fired not a single broadside. Israel expanded its Mediterranean patrols nearly 800 kilometers to the approaches of Port Said and the larger Sinai coast. Barely a month since the 6-day war, on July 11, 1967, 2 Egyptian boats slipped through the patrolled area, maybe probing the edge of Israel's new maritime reach, or simply running supplies along a broken coastline. Whatever the reason, they crossed a line that hadn't been there a month before. Eilat's radar caught their signal. In a heartbeat, she surged forward, although 2 torpedo boat escorts fell into formation. As soon as they knew they'd been found, the Egyptian crafts bolted north toward home waters. However, Eilat didn't stop. She kept coming, closing the gap with each passing second. The Israeli crew was well aware of the line they were about to bridge. Only a few nautical miles separated them from the point where this would cease to be considered a chase and become a violation of sovereignty. But there was no order to stop, no call to hold back. Instead, the gunners locked in. The first salvo shattered the air. One of the Egyptian boats exploded mid-turn, fire ripping through its hull as metal and men vanished in the blast. The second zigzagged wildly to no avail. Another salvo was launched. Another boat was destroyed. Wreckage burned against the surf. There were no survivors. On October 21, 1967, early in what would later become known as the War of Attrition, Egypt was preparing its answer to months of humiliation and loss. A Komar-class missile boat crept through the harbor of Port Said, its twin diesel engines barely louder than the Mediterranean waters. Ahead, the Eilat cut a steady path near the coast, her sleek profile drifting unaware through the fading light. Suddenly, a lookout aboard the Eilat shouted, quote, "Green rocket to starboard." With their eyes fixed on Port Said, the rest of the crew watched in horror as a greenish glow flare shifted into the fierce orange-yellow exhaust of a P-15 missile climbing skyward. It was locked on the destroyer. Captain Yitzhak Shoshan called for battle stations, ordering gunners to open fire. The destroyer roared to maximum speed, twisting to present her stern and minimize the missile's target profile. Meanwhile, the radio operator frantically tried to alert headquarters. The first Styx missile slammed into the starboard boiler room with a 1,000-pound warhead tearing apart the ship's center. Power cut instantly. Fires erupted, and communication fell silent mid-transmission. Before anyone had time to react, a second missile slammed into Eilat's port side. The funnel crumpled and collapsed. Fire surged higher, and the ship groaned under the force. Somehow, she didn't go down. The crew, burned and dazed, scrambled to fight the flames and stop the flooding, clawing for control as they worked to get a distress call out. An hour passed. With Alet settling deeper, the order came to abandon ship. Lifeboats and rafts had been destroyed in the inferno, forcing improvised flotation devices to carry the wounded away. Captain Shashan made a final sweep before plunging into the sea himself, just in time to witness a second Komar launching the third missile strike. It exploded near the stern, breaking the ship's last buoyancy. The destroyer slipped beneath the waves. Moments later, a fourth missile exploded in the water, a final exclamation to the deadly barrage. Of Alet's 199 crew, 47 were lost, while more than double that were wounded. The sinking was a devastating military loss, as well as a seismic moment in naval history. This had become the first warship to have been sunk by surface-to-surface missiles. While the Egyptian public hailed this as a triumphant revenge and a symbol of their rise in missile warfare, naval experts tempered the shock. Alet was a 2-decade-old destroyer, ill-equipped with outdated anti-aircraft guns and no electronic countermeasures. She was an ideal target for a new generation of missile boats. Yet, in that smoky Mediterranean dusk, as the Komars vanished into the night, the age of missile warfare had begun. The sinking of Alet lit the fuse for another drawn-out, punishing conflict along the Mediterranean coast. Whatever hopes there were for calm vanished with her. In her place came a bitter fight built on sheer endurance, heavy firepower, and the sense that neither side was backing down anytime soon. The event sparked brief jubilation across the Arab world. Crowds gathered in Port Said to cheer the 2 Komar missile boats that had delivered the strike, celebrating a hard-won revenge. Meanwhile, in Israel, fury boiled over. Angry mobs surrounded Chief of Staff Yitzhak Rabin, and newspaper editorials screamed for vengeance. 67 hours after the attack, Israel responded with overwhelming force. Heavy mortars pummeled Port Suez, destroying 2 of its 3 oil refineries, the lifeblood of Egypt's cooking and heating gas, as well as 80% of its oil production. Other parts of the city bore the brunt of Israel's retaliation. When the United Nations called for a ceasefire, Israel either ignored the demands or cited technical difficulties. The Soviet Union, alarmed by the escalation, sent 7 warships on a courtesy call to Egyptian ports in a show of support and warning. Between 1967 and 1970, the war of attrition played out like a relentless back and forth. There were no clear fronts, just constant fighting across the sea, the skies, and the desert. Fighter jets darted in and out for quick, violent strikes. Artillery pounded dug-in positions day and night. The desert echoed with the sound of shell fire, each blast carving up the land and wearing down the people caught in between. The old idea that bigger ships with more guns ruled the sea did not hold up after the sinking of Alet. Fast boats with guided missiles had changed the rules. The doctrine changed to focus on early detection, firing first, and survival. Across the Atlantic, U.S. naval brass had been tracking the rise of missile threats for years, but this was different. It had been a real ship, sunk by real missiles. The response was immediate. Crews rushed to bolt on radar jammers, chaff launchers, and heat flares, anything that might confuse a missile long enough to save a ship. The Phalanx system, a radar-guided Gatling gun that could spit out thousands of rounds a minute, was rushed into widespread use. Navy strategy shifted fast. Early warning systems, layers of electronic defenses, and rapid-fire weapons were all stitched together into a single wall of protection. The age of the floating fortress had arrived, not built for size or intimidation, but to survive the next missile. Meanwhile, back in London, the Royal Navy, grappling with the reality that one of its own had fallen victim to a new kind of warfare, also began revising its doctrine. Design boards were stripped clean. The upcoming Type 21 and 22 frigates were redrawn overnight. Sleeker hulls, reduced radar profiles, hardened ECM suites, decoy launchers, and close-in weapon systems surged to the top of the priority list. At sea, radar crews trained relentlessly, tracking phantom missile attacks on flickering green screens. Electronic warfare specialists honed their skills to jam and spoof missile seekers in real time. Alet had become a case study in asymmetric success and vulnerability. The Styx missiles the Komar-class boats fired were slow, bulky, and electronically primitive by today's standards, but they had been devastating. What followed was an explosion in missile proliferation. The Soviet Union continued to develop a wide range of sea-launched weapons, including faster, smarter, and more evasive designs, such as the P-270 Musket and the P-800 Onyx. NATO navies scrambled to keep pace, crafting their own arsenals. Harpoons, exocets, and tomahawks, designed not only to match the threat, but to preempt it. The humble missile boat morphed into fast, low-profile attack craft, hard to spot, harder to stop. Corvettes and other small ships, once seen as little more than patrol boats, suddenly mattered. With long-range missiles and lower price tags, they gave smaller countries a way to hit hard without building a large navy. By the 21st century, the evolution reached a new peak with missiles like Russia's Kalibr and India's BrahMos, low-flying, high-speed cruise missiles capable of skimming sea surfaces and slipping past advanced defenses. The line that started with the Komars has now blurred into submarines, drones, and container-launched cruise missiles. The legacy of Alet lives on, not just in what was lost, but in what was made possible.